Hey Mick, it's Dennis from the Australian Rock Show. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Very well, very well. Mate, great to get you on the podcast today. Now, some of our astute listeners may be aware of you via the Rose Carleo Band, who you play guitar with, and of course, Rose is your wife as well. But way back, and this is the purpose of our chat today, 1994 in Perth, to be precise, you helped to form the hard rock outfit known as the Rogue Sharks. And very soon, the exciting news is that the band are about to release a brand new album called In for the Kill. Now, I know that you've given so much of your time and creative energy over a long period of time into the Rogue Sharks. Got to be satisfying and I guess gratifying as well to get this 12-song release, out there and to see the light of day.
It is. It's been a long time in the making, and some of those songs are actually from that period when the original lead singer Blair Jones and I got together and started writing those songs. And the first track on the new album is actually was written just after the 3 tracks that we did for our very first EP. So it's been in a few different forms, but it's finally going to see the light of day on this album. So yeah, it's really exciting.
Okay, I am keen to dig into some of your history a bit, Mick, but first I thought we might talk over the album In for the Kill for a bit. Firstly, though, and I know that the band released, you just mentioned, a self-titled album back in 2007, and a decade or so before that was the EP titled Lockjaw. Right. But there was an acoustic album titled Acoustic Electric Eclectic, which was released, I think, in 2010. Is In for the Kill the first release since that album?
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay. So
it has been a while, hasn't it?
So talk me through.
Well, we did a re-release in 2010. We had done a small run, and the reason that the acoustic album came about was that we found ourselves without a drummer, and so we sort of jumped on the acoustic sort of blues circuit, and drew on songs that never made it onto previous stuff, and sort of realised that they were more suitable for what we were doing. And then the popularity of those songs and people coming up to us afterwards asking if they could buy a CD, and we didn't have one. We didn't have anything with those songs, and we knew that the 2007 album, which was much heavier, probably wasn't the sort of thing they were after at the time. So it was sort of a case of, quick, we better put something together. And we did the first batch of the acoustic album, and it basically sold out straight away. And then we sort of sat on it for a while, and then with me moving into state, it was, things went sort of a little bit stale for a while, but then you get motivated, you want to start again. And with the contacts with studios and whatnot over here, it was a case of all right, let's do this, and not so much properly, but just make it a little bit better of a release, because while it was available on CD, it was never available online. So it was a case of putting it all together, remix, remaster, and we already had the artwork from previously. So while it was a 2010 release, it actually went online 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I guess could be a fib. It might be 3 because COVID has just been a blur.
Sure. And maybe you could talk me through how In for the Kill came to fruition. And from memory, I recall you telling me a while back that there was an album that was shelved some years back. I guess, right. Did this album emerge from those tracks, or is this a brand new set of songs entirely? That's
exactly where it came from. So prior, the years leading up to the 2007 release of our debut full-length album, we did have a bunch of songs, and we were very satisfied with the way they were going. But it wasn't until we had a song off that album called Let Me Go that was mixed and mastered, and both the studio engineer that we were working with and our mastering guy in Sydney both said to us, this is the sound you guys should be chasing. It's a more modern sound. And we sort of realised, okay, we'll go with that advice. And so we looked at all the later songs that we'd written and finished pre-production of those, and they are what became that 2007 album. But we had 8 to 10 songs of finished stuff, or a couple of songs that were not quite finished. the silly thing is, they're the ones we played live most. Most of the stuff that we were playing live was from previous albums. I think there was only 3 or 4 songs on the big album that we were playing live. And so after moving here and sort of realising that, you know, if I don't get onto that, time's going to get away from me. So I rang my brother Steve, who's the singer and guitarist, and I said, righto, from what I can work out, we've got a stack of songs spread over, you know, 3 studios in Hobart. Can you corral them all up and send them to me? And that we were able to do that. And in the end, we realised we had 27 songs at different stages of completion.
Wow!
And even though those first 8 songs in our mind were finished, it was a case of whatever we do now to finish is still going to sound different. So we ended up giving all those existing songs the same treatment as the newer stuff. So the song "In for the Kill" that the new album's titled named after, that song actually was on the 2007 album, but it was a hidden track, which, unless you had the right sort of CD player back in the day, you had to find it, and it was strategically placed in front of track number 1. And while we did sort of make a point of it at the time, the track sort of disappeared. And it was, thought, we can't let that happen. So we resurrected that track, and it was all the same bass, guitars, and drums and vocals. But there was a couple of things where we just gave things a certain treatment, where we might have taken a guitar out and added a new guitar. And with a lot of the songs, it was, you know, adding a bit more oomph to the drums, because there's so much that's changed with recording processes and that sort of thing. So it was mentioned to me that, you know, why don't you just re-record all the guitars? And I was like, no, because that's the sound we had in the day. You know, that's where I was at. I don't want to sound. I don't want to play those parts 20 years later, and because that's how old some of those songs are, and sound like a guy with 20 years more experience. I want them to sound like they were back in the day.
They're preserved for that time period, aren't they?
They are, yeah. So and then I guess the challenge was then to make sure that any of the other tracks that we did as overdubs or anything like that were from the, you know, had the same sort of flavour. We didn't want, you know, too much in the way of amp modelling or processing or anything like that, because you can start to tell when it starts to get, you know, with big rock guitars of, you know, albums from the 70s and 80s, where you could hear feedback in the studio and that sort of thing. I didn't want to lose that, because there's, you know, the idea of having a nice loud cab and letting chords ring out and that sort of thing. I think the first sign of something being more of a in the studio, not necessarily being a loud cab, is not hearing that little bit of background noise or a chord fading off without having some, you know, harmonic feedback. So that's what I like about this. It's a current, like the mixing and the mastering is current, but, you know, 80% of those tracks were recorded, you know, in the early 2000s, the late 90s and 2000s. Some of those drum tracks were from 1999 from memory.
Which is nice in a way that you can carry all that through, because, as I mentioned, it is your baby, if you like. You know, for all these years, you've got to get it exactly how you want it before you're content to release it. So I guess besides yourself and brother Steve, who are the players on this new album? Is your son Sam Adkins on the drums, right?
No, Sam will be on the next album.
Okay.
But Sam did feature. There's a really, really strong high vocal in a song we've got called Damage Control. And Sam added his vocals to that because he's got a very, very wide range. He can sing high, and he's got a very, very broad range. I don't know how many octaves, but it's a phenomenal range. So he did actually help us there. My wife, Rose, you probably would have heard her voice comes through. She does some really nice harmony vocals on 2 tracks, Falling Head First and a song called Gone Away, near the end of the album. And there's actually 3 drummers across the album. The original drums were done by a fella called Phil White, who's a Tassie boy, who's actually plays in the Australian Army Band. He's been in the Army for must be close to 20 plus years now.
Okay.
And he's been based in Canberra and Wagga. So he plays on at least 7 of the tracks. And Steve Sowerby, who was the drummer for the Eurogliders when they had all the big hits back in the day, he after he left the band, he moved to Tassie and was happy to come in, and all up he did about 6 or 7 songs in the studio, and he features on 3 on the album. And our original drummer that we had sent our tracks to from the first album, a guy called Frank Bazil, he's in Florida now, but when he first started doing tracks for us, he was in New Orleans. I think he just got out of, was moving from New Orleans to Florida around about the time that they had the hurricanes there. Mm-hmm. But he's in Florida now, and he's played on Damage Control and In For The Kill.
So original vocalist Blair Jones left the band a while back, correct?
Yeah. It's not so much that he left, it's just that we're all in different states. I'm in New South Wales, Blair's remained in Perth, and Stephen's in Tassie. And when we last toured over there, obviously we invited Blair along, and we managed to share the load with the vocal side of things. But I'm sure if we were all living in the same state, we'd be rehearsing and planning big things. But the other thing with this album is that there are tracks and there are certain vocal lines and notes that Blair hits, and they hark from the days of what we grew up on. He quite often gets compared to Bruce Dickinson and Sebastian Bach, having that big, powerful vibrato. And there was no way I was going to let those songs just sit idle and not have his vocals heard. So a lot of those songs were co-written, and Blair did actually record those tracks in Tassie on various trips down to Tassie that he did back in the early 2000s. And then some of the later tracks Stephen had done between 2006, 2007 up to recently, when we went through the balance of the songs that we'd started, and then said, okay, these are the ones where we've done drums and bass and guitars, but hadn't got as far as doing the vocals. So, so there's a nice spread there between Stephen and Blair, and there's a couple of songs where you'll hear them both singing the lead track or swapping verses. There's a song at the end, a little bit of a silly song, where Stephen and Blair go verse for verse. And then backing vocals is done by all of us, but predominantly myself and Stephen.
You mentioned Bruce Dickinson there, and I guess anyone who has to tackle the voice of Dickinson, as Blair did in, he was in the Iron Maiden tribute some years back, which obviously requires a huge voice. Is Blair doing anything musically these days?
No, he's well, not that I know of recently.
Okay.
I haven't seen him since March last year. We've had a bit of a chat since I sent him the album. So I'm not sure if he's actually doing anything musically. He's enjoying life as a father and a grandfather and having a big family. Still living in Perth.
Good stuff. So I guess let's talk over a couple of tracks. First single is the strong-sounding Time Alone, which I just love. Your guitar work, especially the effects on the solo, I think work really well. But it's the chorus, which for me is the song's key. Why do you disapprove? You Never Give Me Time Alone. I guess it's a fantastic single choice there, Mick.
Yeah. It's funny, that song has been one of our favourites, and one of our, usually comes in the live set somewhere around song 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. And Stephen had written that back in the late 90s, and it was just one of our go-to songs, and sort of based on current events at the time with him, and it sort of didn't help that we're 2 of 4 brothers, and the 3 of us would sometimes make a point that we missed our little brother, and would like to hang out with him a bit more. So he might have written about that, but yeah, certainly not the case now. He's very happily enjoying his 3 children and the lovely girl that he's with now, Tamika. But yeah, Stephen was able to capture that angst of the, I guess the best way to describe it is back then he was in a relationship that would have been best described as smothering. Mm-hmm. And I think you can tell that the sentiment is there.
Sure.
But at the same time, he's not necessarily having a go at that person. he's making a point of having some time alone, but he's also making a point of, you'll feel better about it too. A very, very clever song in that it's a different subject matter, but it still rocks along.
And I think you told me that the second single could be a song called Damage Control. Maybe I watch too much motorcycle racing, but I can envisage this frenetic song playing over race highlights and crashes. What's the background to Damage Control?
I really don't know, because Stephen comes up with this stuff and it's phenomenal. And I make things hard for him, because 10, 15 years later, when I go to do all the setting up of the album and uploading lyrics and whatnot, I might ring him just to clarify a particular line. Then I go, "What's the song about?" And it's like, I can't remember. And it's like, okay, well, obviously we can establish that somebody is at a loose end or in a situation that needs reining in, needs a bit of control about it. And I think the approach is there that the first person is asking for help to, maybe control their lives a little bit more, or set them on the path to something a little bit more fortuitous, as opposed to, going down the wrong road. So it's another one of those songs that sort of catches people by surprise, especially family, because it's like, where'd this song come from? It's like, we always had it. And it did appear in the last few shows in Tassie. It became part of the set. Because of the sudden in-your-face intro, and then all of a sudden the halftime verses, which are suddenly, there's a whole lot of space there, and then they just build up, and then next thing we're back at 100 miles an hour.
That's good. I think I used the word frenetic, which is pretty accurate. But Mick, I know that you've called Sydney home for some time, but much of your life, and I believe you were born in Tasmania as well. I was never sure if the Rogue Sharks hailed from Perth or Tasmania, to be honest, but I guess what prompted the move to Perth, and what was the connection there?
Okay. So, no, I wasn't born in Tassie. I was born in Darwin.
Okay.
And Cyclone Tracy put paid to that, because there wasn't much left after the cyclone, but my father was originally from Tassie, so we moved there.
Gotcha.
So I grew up in Tassie. And then you sort of get to an age where, and a lot of us around my generation, we sort of get to our late teens, early 20s and think about what's beyond the Bass Strait, and was going to move to Sydney. But the band that I was going to join there had decided that they were going to go to Perth, because a few of them were from there. And so I ended up joining that band in 93. I drove over early in 93. And pretty well stayed in Perth for just under 4 years. Didn't move back until November 1996. So a lot of original band work there. Teamed up with James Morley, who'd finished with the Angels at that stage and was looking for players to promote his original album, his first solo release. So we did that for a while, and then wanted to start a family. And at the time, things had gone a bit quiet around mid-96. So I thought, probably a good time to head back to Tassie and start a family. And that's basically what we did. So I kept playing, but quite often was called back to Perth to do tribute shows, especially the Bon Scott stuff. Usually around July, we'd all head back and do the Bond But Not Forgotten shows, which I think my last one I played was around about 2013. So Tassie, Perth, I love the place. I'd move there tomorrow, but it's nice to be able to go back. And Rose's family are all over there as well. So it's the lifelong friendships that I've made with musicians and the musos that Rose already knows. It's always great to catch up. So the band Rogue Sharks itself became an entity when Blair and I got together, because I'd been sitting on the name for a while. I'd been, as a kid, was always mad keen on sharks, and mainly because they just scare the hell out of me, but I'm fascinated by them. And I'd read a book by a late author, Alan Sharp, and it was called Shark Attack in Australian Waters. And so it was a history up until around about the early 90s of shark attacks, or recorded shark attacks in Australian waters. Very interesting stuff. And the rogue shark theory where essentially there's no such thing. It's just a theory. There's no evidence at all to prove that, a shark can become rogue and start targeting humans. And everyone has a theory on it, but technically that's all it is a theory. And it's just like, it doesn't matter. Sounds like a good band name.
Well, that's good. We're not just digging into musical history. We're doing some. We're learning as well this evening, which is great.
Worry,
I'm learning.
I get enough comments from people through social media. The odd comment. There's no such thing as a rogue shark. Yeah, I know. I've read it. Somebody wants to correct you all the time. It still happens. It's like, yeah, all right.
Okay, so that's pretty much the history then. Thank you for clearing that up. I'd often wondered what the connection was between Western Australia and Tasmania. But I guess back to the new record, Falling Head First, which I believe is also slated as another single, could in fact be my favourite song on the album, which is a tie with Heartburn. Slower paced than much of the other tracks, really melodic as well. I just love the way the guitar solo chimes in. And if I'm not mistaken, there's some organ in there too. Maybe a little tinge of country in there too, which I just love. Falling Head First.
Yes, I guess you pick that. That's good.
4 minutes and 40 seconds of classy, well-written rock and roll.
Thank you. Andrew Dawson, a local musician over here in Sydney, he's a very, very sought-after keyboard player and a phenomenal guitarist. He sounds just like Stevie Ray Vaughan and Hendrix on a good day. He's phenomenal. So yes, he came on board and helped us with the keyboard tracks, and it just added something to those to the songs that he played on, but especially Falling Head First. And he knew too that he knows exactly where to place himself, because when you hear him, he's not competing with anything, and his timing's absolutely perfect. And the song was pretty well finished, but there was just something, chipping away at me going, just ring Andrew, see if he's got some ideas. And I just sent him the tracks, and they came back as you hear it. It's just phenomenal.
Love it, mate. Much of your time is spent devoted to the Rose Carleo Band. How's that musical balance work for you? And I guess it's kind of cool that you can shift away from, the heavy bluesy rock, I guess, with Rose, and then dip your toe into the heavier musical water of the Rogue Sharks. It's a good balance. And naturally, I guess some of Rose's country influences will come out in your material as well. It's a pretty cool thing.
It is cool. And the good thing about the music we do with Rose Carleo Band is that we get to write the songs based around our early, our influences like Free and Bad Company and, the big three of AC/DC, Rose Tattoo and the Angels. And, just keeping it simple but combining it with obviously Rose's powerful vocals, but also the melodies that we come up with, and especially the ones that she comes up with. And working with Shady and Kingy, they bring a swagger to the band that takes songs into another direction. So it's you come up with an idea and then you go to rehearsal, and then half an hour later you've come up with the arrangement, and it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting that to happen, but everything just turns out so much better than when you start sitting down and doing the demos. But the balance has been, I suppose it's worked mainly because with COVID and with a lot of the lockdowns and gigs not being there for a while, it gave me a chance to catch up on the last lot of the Rogue Shark stuff. And we even started the next 3 or 4 tracks of the next album. That's how much time we had spare before the lockdown started to sort of not drag on, and gigs started to come in. And now we've got at least 6 demoed up for Rose's next recording, and we've got a mate in Queensland who's come up with some really good ideas, and we've done some co-writing with him, and hopefully we'll be in the studio within a month to do a project for him as well, which will actually coincide with our own stuff. But that's something I can give you an idea about later on. It's quite a nifty little project.
You obviously have a great chemistry with Rose. Where and when did your paths first cross? I believe you were both playing the Perth circuit in the early 90s.
We were, yeah.
Clown School, and Rose was fronting Elusive. Yeah. Have I got that correct?
That's correct, yeah. And so we would cross paths with those various nightclubs around Perth. And then when I was working with James, the band started off as a 4-piece, but then sort of morphed into I think we might have even had 7 members at one stage, but it settled in with a keyboard player and with Rose doing backing vocals. Then eventually James just wanted to rock out and play guitar, so Rose ended up doing most of the lead vocals. So I guess our paths would have first crossed mid to late 1993 at the Backstage Bar, where they would do multiple band nights. And I remember just prior to moving back to Tassie, Rose had rung me to ask if I'd be interested in joining her band. And it was quite funny because I'm moving back to Tassie in about a week's time, so we still laugh about that things never eventuated into playing in bands together there, and then it was something like 17 or 18 years later and we were both in the same band and married.
It's cool how it all works out sometimes, I guess.
Yeah.
I know that you've written some great songs with Rose, and I know we are focusing on the Rogue Sharks today, but the title track from Time Is Now, that one has remained in my head since I first heard it. And in terms of the positive message behind the lyrics, it's something which I often channel as a reminder to live for the moment. And I'm sure I'm not the only listener who gained something from that track as well.
You're right. She gets that sort of sentiment, those comments all the time. And especially that if they don't target or mention that particular song, they're talking about the album anyway, because there's so many other themes that people relate with on that album. It is. Some people have called it their Bible, but it's more of a sort of a release for some people, because we've heard it multiple times where if people get down in the dumps or feel that things are getting a bit overbearing, they put the album on and it just really, they perk up and go, yes, I can do this. So it is. I don't know. It's a defining moment, especially for Rose, to make that leap from the country scene into the more of the blues rock sound, and yet we were able to capture the elements of her country background in that song as well. So it still absolutely stomps along. But when I wrote the solo to that, it was like, it has to be on a Telecaster, and I'd have to add, some of those nice little country licks to just give it a bit of flavour without, because we didn't want to lose her country fans, and that album still appeals to her country fans and her blues rock fans.
Mate, you and your brother Steve were obviously immersed in rock and roll when you were growing up together. Rock and roll has always been the bond which has tied my brother and I together, which is a pretty cool thing. When and how did that journey with Steve begin? And further to that, what was your gateway into guitar?
Okay, well, as a 10-year-old, I had bad knees, and my mum took me to the doctor, and the doctor just said that it's a case of growing up, the old story, growing too quickly, and but it was something that was slowing me down and causing me a lot of pain. So I wasn't allowed to do sport or do PE at school, and basically from the age of 10 through to 14, while all the other kids in class were doing the various sports things, if I wasn't helping out by umpiring or just assisting with the coach or the PE teacher, I'd be in a classroom by myself playing guitar. And mum had been playing since she was a kid, and she taught me my first few chords, and sort of, I just didn't put it down from there. And being a very, very musical family, Stephen was bound to be influenced by it at some time. There's a 6-year age difference between us. But what I like about Stephen's writing is that where I grew up with the die-hard Aussie pub rock sound, Stephen was experiencing that and influenced by it, but he also grew up through the grunge the era, and that's why he can write a really phenomenal 4-on-the-floor Aussie pub rock song, but at the same time he can also come up with something that has more of that 90s grunge feel, which I can't do. For the life of me, I can't capture that, whereas Stephen can do that. So when we get together, he can come up with ideas, and I have to tell myself, don't turn it into a pub rock song, because Stephen hasn't written it from that angle. Sure. And sometimes there's a little bit, let's stick with this, or let's maybe stick with that. But I guess the combination of me being that little bit older and being able to work on arrangements, and knowing from a live perspective, because at the time we started working together, Stephen was still in school and at college and hadn't started playing gigs. And I would think from the perspective of like listening to his demos, okay, how would this play out live? You know, there's all these ideas, but with a 4-piece band or a 5-piece band, how would we play this out live? And so you'd grasp the ideas, and on a few occasions, because he had such good ideas, you could actually dissect the song and go, you know what, those 2 ideas are a song on their own. These here, they're the next song. And you end up coming out with 2 different songs that you would never have ever guessed came from the one song.
So you've both got those, different strengths, but I guess music runs rich through the veins of the Adkins family, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. My dad was he was an opera singer. He still sings in choirs, and he came from a very, very musical family with other family members playing in orchestras and being music teachers. Mum's side of the family was very theatrical, and my grandmother, through the war, they were from England. She was part of a theatre troupe that used to tour around the UK before they came to Australia, but always theatre and a lot of the sort of variety show sort of stuff and musicals and that sort of thing. But Mum was a massive fan of the Beatles and got to see them in Adelaide in 1964. So it was, when I started to play guitar, I was influenced by a lot of the stuff that in the record collection, the Beatles for Sale album, the Rubber Soul album, we had Elvis, and then a little bit later, there was Buddy Holly, and then there was Rod Stewart, so and Chuck Berry. So, and a lot of my playing style back then was Chuck Berry and George Harrison, and I guess it just sort of morphed from there. All the family, the brothers number 2 and 4, Matthew and Philip, both play piano, and Stephen is a multi-instrumentalist. I wouldn't be able to list everything that he can play. But if you listen to the song Down on our acoustic album, Stephen had played every single instrument on that and sung all the vocals. And he says, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "I want to play on that song." So he quickly wrote an acoustic guitar part for me. Yeah, phenomenal play. And obviously it's influenced our kids as well with his kids, Kiara and Zeno, have both had musical releases, and my son Sam and my daughter Tiffany have done the same, and Sam's about to release his 2nd album. So
it's a wonderful thing. Should be more of it. Should be more of it.
Yeah.
It's a positive thing. But there is a track called River Fiddich, is a tributary.
Yeah, the River Fiddich Fling.
Okay, located in northeast Scotland. There is a short instrumental on the new album, a blast of Scottish fused fretwork called River Fiddich Fling. What's the story behind that one, Mick? Okay.
It was a style of playing that I had used in a couple of solos previously, and it's actually very similar to a section of the solo from Time Alone. And I just developed it, and for some reason, that song, which that little fling, that's 20 years old as well, it just seemed to bounce along. And anyone who ever heard it would say, "Gee, that sounds Scottish." Well, it sounds like it's from Scotland or something like that. And then when I recorded it in the studio, it was like, well, what are we going to call it? And Rose heard it and was like, "That sounds Scottish." And my brother and the guy in the studio, everyone was sort of, "It sounds like it's got a Scottish influence." I thought, well, what do I love about Scotland apart from the fact that the Young Brothers and Bon Scott came from there, and Blair's from Scotland, he was born there. What's my favourite thing about Scotland? Well, it would have to be whiskey. What's my favourite whiskey? Glenfiddich. Get on Google Maps, have a look at where the distillery is, and it's like, there's a river there. We'll call it that. So that's how it came about. There's just the positive comments about of this Scottish influence, and I forget what Blair said to me when I sent him the album. Basically, he said, "You sure you're not a Scot?" As it turns out through Ancestry.com, we are Scottish, English, and Irish. But yeah, that's how it came about. It was just a case of, there's the sound, here's the comments I'm getting. What's my favourite thing about Scotland? And that's basically it. I just sort of named it after my favourite whiskey, or the river in the township from where Glenfiddich comes from.
I know that for a time you performed in a Perth-based AC/DC tribute band. AC/DC, among many bands, obviously a huge influence on you. And I do wish to highlight the wonderful tribute the band wrote for Bon Scott titled Bonfire, included on the Lockjaw EP. Not enough AC/DC fans know about that song, and they should. So I do encourage listeners to search out that track after listening to this interview. It's great stuff. Actually, that original EP was only produced on cassette and was only available in Perth at the time, correct?
That's right, and back in the day when there were only two of us involved, it was just all on cassette. And I'm sure that just because we were so excited about it, we probably gave more away than we actually sold.
Sure.
And then all we ended up with the old DAT tapes from the studio, and that's what we were able to resurrect. I think that was the one we released January 21. I think it was February 21 when we re-released the EP. And just gave it a nice up-to-date mastering. But yeah, that was those songs especially, which is why I wanted it to re-release it. Some of Blair's vocals, all of his vocals on that album are just phenomenal. And that's when we knew we had a chemistry when it came to his lyrics. And it's funny because I'd have the music and he'd have the lyric book. And then I'd play, and then he starts singing, and it's like, yeah, well, there's that one, and that's just how it came about.
Whilst on AC/DC, and I know that over time you've got to play with Mark Evans and Simon Wright. Of course, Mark Opitz has produced some of Rose's stuff as well. What did you learn from those three gents?
Just that they were gentlemen. They're really, really top guys. And if Mark wasn't in the music industry, he'd definitely be a comedian. I've never laughed so hard in anyone's presence, to the point where I think I'm going to have a heart attack. His timing is sensational. And Simon is just a gentleman as well, very easygoing, quite happy to sit down and have a chat. And back 10 years ago, when I was sort of in a bit of a quandary of what my next move would be before moving to Sydney, he gave me some advice, which was good advice at the time, because I'd actually been thinking about, maybe instead of moving interstate, maybe go to the US and try my luck there. But he did make a very, very valid point when it came to the tyranny of distance and away from family and that sort of thing. So it was more of a case of, just do a small move first and then see how you go from there. And it's obviously paid off, but that was advice from Simon that, I really took to heart. And he would know because he's made some big moves in his life.
And I also do wish to mention the Pedigree Mongrel album from Bitzer, which saw some of your most inspired guitar work on songs by the likes of the Easy Beats, AC/DC Chain and the Rosie Tats, among others. That looked like a cool project to be involved in. It
was great. The funny thing with that, there were so many Steves and Micks on that project that I think some people were getting confused with who actually played what, because we had Steve Mulry, Steve Edmonds, Mick O'Shea, myself, and Mick Arnold. I'm sure there's probably and Steve King. I think it was just a phenomenal amount of Micks and Steves. But no, it was really, really good, and being able to come up with arrangements of some of those songs that still complement the song but still have your own flavour with them. And it's always a challenge, especially with AC/DC, what you do with those songs. And sometimes they're best left alone, and sometimes an idea will come to you and you'll think about it, and actually that's not too bad. But I've got this thing with recording AC/DC tunes, and I always believe that Angus and Malcolm would, everything they ever recorded was just perfect. And I didn't want to go into the studio each time and try and do exactly what they did. And so I in my own way, I've made subtle changes that while it might sound like the original, like with the, I don't know, have you heard the song Sin City from the New Colonials? It was a thing that I did with Shady.
No,
and Kingy.
I don't think I have.
Okay, same gentleman who put us together in Bitzer. We did a version of Sin City, and that actually has keyboards and harmony vocals in it. And while you think straight away, no way, you did not, Well, we did, and it wasn't us. We'd done our tracks, and it actually was mixed and mastered in Canada with the extra tracks done over there. But very, very, very clever. But yeah, I always sort of make a point of when I treat people like Angus and Malcolm as gods, it's like they've already done it. They're already perfect. So don't try to, get as close. Pay tribute to the guys and their playing, but you've got to at least do something that's just that little point of difference. And if somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh, you played that wrong," it's like, no, I didn't. I actually just chose not to play it that way. It was already perfect. There's no you're wasting your time trying to get any better, and that's how I've always treated Angus and Malcolm, or AC/DC in general, with their playing. They've already mastered it.
Well said, mate. Future plans. What do you have lined up for 2022? You did tell me, and I was just going to ask to please tell me that there is a new Rose Carleo Band release on the way. Yes,
and it's been delayed, obviously, the 2 years by what's been happening. I through a lot of the stand down of last year, I took the plunge and just went out and spent some money on a new computer and recording software and some other equipment and improved the home studio, and just had the time to be able to put a whole heap of ideas together. And that's all coming to fruition. I mentioned before we're doing a project with a mate of mine that used to be in a band together in Tassie many, many years ago, a guy called Darren Booth, who lives in Queensland. He's got some great ideas, and we've sort of rejoined at the hip as a songwriting partnership with a project there, and hopefully we'll be in the studio within the month putting that together. But yeah, just we're still at the pre-production stage, and but in the meantime we're going out in May to pay homage to the bands from Sydney and Newcastle, Wrecking Crew and Judge Mercy, and we teamed up with Dave Wilkins from Wrecking Crew, and we've also got Steve Edmonds, who's coming on guitar to help me out, because there's a lot of stuff on guitar to learn. But Shady on drums, Kingy on bass, Steve Edmonds and myself on guitars, and Rose and Dave Wilkins on vocals. And it's going to be a night of Rose Carleo Band, Wrecking Crew, Judge Mercy and Rose Tattoo, featuring the bands that we've all played with.
So is that an EP? Sorry, the Rose Carleo Band, or will that be
the next Rose? It is likely that the next recording will be an EP. We've got 6 tracks at this stage,
yep.
And Rose is absolutely champing at the bit to get in the studio, and again, because we've had that 2 year stalemate. This is where I would like to think that it all starts in about a month's time when we start tracking drums.
Okay. Mick, we should start to finish up. I've had these tracks on In For The Kill in the car over the past week, and I've really got to know the songs quite well. I reckon anyone who listens to our podcast, or is indeed a fan of loud guitar-based rock and roll that blends, blues-based grooves to flat-out heavy metal, then In For The Kill is going to be an album right up their alley. Some really strong material on here. When is the official release date? And I guess what's the best way for fans to get a hold of the album?
Okay, so hopefully we'll be releasing the first single, Time Alone, within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
Stephen's been flat out putting the artwork and everything together, and I've been doing the setting up from this end. So at the same time, we're being strategic in how we're going to be releasing it, because Stephen also has another project which has been finalised, and they've got his band Plan F. They've got an album release on the 16th of May. So I'm likely to do my singles, the 2 singles prior to that, so that we're not conflicting with each other. So I'm going to suggest that late May will be when the album is available, and that's when it'll coincide with another single, which is your favourite, Falling Head First.
Wonderful. Facebook.com/Rogue Sharks. Is that the best place?
Yes. Getting a new website built at the moment, doing all sorts of stuff.
Cool. Mate, thank you for your time today. Good luck with this upcoming new album, In For The Kill. Fans should make an effort to dig into some of your recorded work as well, and I reckon the self-titled Rogue Sharks album from 2007 is an ideal place to start. May I also wish you all the very best with the Rose Carleo Band as well. an authentic outfit who really are one of the best rock and roll outfits which Australia has produced over the past 5 or so years. More people need to get on board, as I think the Rose Carleo Band really are deserving of wider recognition and greater success.
Thanks, Dennis. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Mick, before you go, every guest on our show gets to choose a song by an Australian band, something which is significant to them. What would you like to choose and why?
Let's go Hard Road by Stevie Wright.
Great. Why have you chosen that one?
Just love that. And I only really became familiar with that song when Rod Stewart released it. And I just knew there was something about it that wasn't typical of Rod Stewart. And I was just not surprised when I found out it was a Vander and Young composition. And I think the way that Stevie sings it too, it's definitely coming from the heart. So, and it's one of my all-time favourite Aussie songs.
Great choice, mate. Please keep in touch, and I'll talk again soon.
All right, mate.
Thank you.